You stand at the stove in the quiet of the morning, the house still holding the cool of the night. The egg goes into the pan, you give it a minute, and you slide the turner underneath. Then, that familiar, frustrating resistance. The white grabs the iron and rips. The pale yellow yolk breaks, weeping across the metal, and what should have been a clean, beautiful, over-easy egg turns into a scrambled, rubbery mess stuck fast to the bottom. You stand there scraping at the crust, and you think the same thing nearly everyone thinks today. This old cast iron is simply too much trouble. You look at the dark, heavy skillet and think about heading to the store to buy one of those modern, lightweight pans. The ones coated in slick, dark gray chemical layers that promise nothing will ever stick again. The ones that cost $50 or $60 and claim to solve your morning frustrations with space-age engineering. I want to stop you right there. Stop and think about what you are about to do. You are on the verge of throwing away the finest piece of cookware you will ever own for want of 3 simple things that nobody taught you. I am Elias. My family came over from the Palatinate in 1838, and we have farmed and cooked on this same Lancaster County ground ever since. The pan I am holding right now is older than I am. It hung in my mother's summer kitchen, and her mother's before that, and Esther cooks our breakfast on it most mornings now. It has never once seen a slick factory coating, never had a chemical sprayed on it from an aerosol can, and I will tell you plainly, it is more truly non-stick than any modern pan you can buy, with nothing in it but raw iron and good fat baked deep into the metal by years of honest use. There is no delicate film to scratch off into your children's food, no forever chemical that the manufacturers themselves are quietly backing away from these days. Just iron, fire, and fat, the way it has always been since the blacksmiths first poured molten metal into sand molds. But understand this. I must be completely honest with you about the limits of this metal. Cast iron will not save you if you are running against the clock. If you have exactly 3 minutes to bolt down your breakfast before rushing out to the truck, if you expect a pan to behave like a microwave oven, where you can just press a button and walk away, this method will fail you. Iron is not a material for a hurried life. It demands a moment of your presence, a small slowing down. If you cannot give it that, it will punish you every single time. Why do you think we find ourselves replacing our cookware every 2 or 3 years now? How did our grandmothers manage to feed whole households using nothing but heavy black skillets that never left the stovetop? Let us look closely at what is actually happening on that surface. To the naked eye, a well-used cast iron pan looks smooth, almost like polished stone. But if you were to look closer, down where the metal meets the food, you would see that raw iron is actually an endless landscape of microscopic peaks, deep valleys, and jagged, open pores. It is a rough, hungry surface. When you take a cold pan, drop your butter in, and immediately crack an egg over it, the liquid protein of the egg white does exactly what nature designed it to do. It flows downward. It sinks deep into those tiny valleys, filling every microscopic crevice like wet cement pouring into a gravel driveway. As the burner slowly warms the pan, that trapped protein cooks right inside the teeth of the metal. It binds to the iron. You haven't just dropped an egg into a pan, you have accidentally glued it there. When you try to force your turner beneath it, you are trying to rip a chemical bond apart. Of course it tears. The old people didn't use modern scientific terms to describe this, but they understood the nature of the material deeply through daily repetition. They knew that iron expands when it meets heat. Think of it like a dry wooden bucket. When it is dry and cold, the seams are open, but when you fill it with water or warm it up, the wood swells and the gaps seal tight. Iron behaves the exact same way. When it is properly heated, those microscopic valleys tighten up. The surface changes its very shape. Most folks get the remedy for this completely backward. They assume the problem is the seasoning. That mysterious dark coating everyone talks about on the internet. They think they need to scrub the pan down to the silver and start over with expensive oils from a catalog. I tell you, 9 times out of 10, your seasoning is perfectly fine. The fault lies not in the surface, but in the temperature. It is a failure of patience. Iron is a heavy, slow element. It does not heat up the instant the flame touches it, like a thin sheet of aluminum or stamped steel. It takes its time drawing the heat up from the fire, absorbing it deeply, storing it away like a limestone rock sitting in an evening hearth. That slow, heavy density is its greatest gift. It creates an even, steady heat that does not flinch when cold food hits it. But that slowness is also the exact quality that modern cooks fight against. They expect instant results, and the iron rebels. So, the first and most vital secret to a truly non-stick pan is learning how to wait. You must learn to read the iron before you ever introduce it to the fat or the food. My mother showed me a simple way to listen to what the pan is telling you, a way to know exactly when those microscopic pores have closed and the metal is ready to release rather than grab. Let me bring you over to the stove right now. Look at this dry, empty skillet sitting over the low flame. I want to show you the precise visual cue and the physical sensation you need to feel with your own hand to know the exact second the iron has transformed. Once you see how the dry metal handles the heat before the butter ever touches the surface, you will understand exactly how to make an egg glide across bare iron like it is riding on a sheet of winter ice. You stand here at the stove, and the first thing you must do is adjust your hand on the dial. The most common mistake made by beginners is turning the burner to high, thinking that a fierce roaring flame will speed the process along. It will not. High heat creates hot spots in heavy iron, scorching the seasoning in one place while leaving the rest of the pan cold. Set your burner to a steady, medium-low flame. We are going to give the skillet 4 or 5 minutes to draw that heat up into its bones. As the minutes pass, you will begin to smell it. Not the smell of burning fat, but the clean, faint scent of old iron waking up under the flame. Now raise your hand and hold it flat, about a span above the rim of the pan. Do not touch the metal. Just listen with your skin. You should feel a deep, heavy warmth radiating upward, steady and salst, like the heat that breathes off a stone wall after a long summer afternoon in the sun. Look down into the bottom of the skillet. The iron should look completely dark, dull, and dry. Before we ever introduce a single drop of fat, we perform the old test that my mother taught me. Dip your fingers into a cup of cool water and flick a single small droplet onto the center of the dry iron. Watch it closely. If that droplet hits the surface and vanishes instantly with a sharp, angry hiss, your pan is too hot and it will scorch your butter the moment it lands. If the water just sits there and bubbles lazily, the iron is still cold in its heart. What you want to see is that droplet ball up into a perfect glassy sphere and dance across the iron like a bead of mercury, skating around the dark surface before it disappears into steam. Modern cooks call this the Leidenfrost effect, but the old folks just knew it as the sign that the iron had closed its pores and was ready to work. Now, and only now, we bring in the fat. Take a half spoonful of fresh, sweet butter, or a bit of clean, rendered lard from your crock. Drop it right into the middle of the pan. Watch how it behaves. It must not sit there like a lump. The very second it touches the heated iron, the fat should slacken. It melts from the bottom up, turning from a solid white block into a rich golden liquid that runs instantly toward the edges, hunting out the low spots in the metal. Listen to the sound it makes. It should not pop or splatter furiously. It should give you a soft, rhythmic whisper. That gentle foaming is the water content of the butter cooking away, leaving behind the pure, slick fat. Tip the skillet slightly by the handle, swirling that golden pool until it coats the entire bottom and runs an inch up the sidewalls. The dry, dull gray of the iron will instantly transform into a deep, wet, midnight black luster. You have just built a perfectly smooth temporary barrier between the metal and your breakfast. Now the egg. Crack it clean. Bring your hands down close to the iron and let it drop in softly. Do not drop it from high above, or the weight of the fall will split the yolk against the heavy metal. The moment the egg lands in that hot fat, you will hear that steady, gentle simmering begin. Look at the edges of the white. They will immediately turn from clear glass to an opaque, milky white, bubbling slightly, and forming a tiny, ruffled lace edge that browns just a fraction. This is where the great test of nerve begins. And it is where the impatient cook ruins everything. Your hand will instinctively want to reach for the metal turner. You will want to nudge the egg, to poke at the edges, to see if it is sticking to the bottom. Stop right there. Put your turner down and take your hand completely off the handle. Step back from the stove and give the egg 30 seconds of complete, unhurried faith. Understand this. If you go poking at that white now, while the proteins are still liquid and setting, you will slide your turner straight through the soft bottom. You will be the one who tears the egg, and then you will blame the iron for your own restlessness. Let the heat do its work. The iron is lifting that egg on a microscopic cushion of steam rising from its own moisture. After half a minute has passed, take the skillet firmly by the handle. Give it a small, deliberate jog, a sharp little shake forward and back. Watch what happens. The egg will not cling to the spot where it landed. The entire thing will shift at once, loose and whole, gliding across the bottom of the black skillet as free as a sled on a frozen hill. That is the iron, telling you it has completed its work and released the food. Only now do you slip your turner under the white. It will slide underneath effortlessly, without a single catch or scrape, because the egg has already freed itself. A gentle, smooth flip 3 or 5 seconds on the other side to set the top while keeping the yolk whole and soft, and you tip the pan sideways over your plate. The egg slides right off, clean as a whistle, leaving nothing behind in the skillet but a thin, clear sheen of leftover fat. But our work is only half finished. The way you treat this iron right now, before you sit down to eat, is what determines whether it will behave for you tomorrow morning. Do not set the pan aside on a cold burner to sit while you eat your breakfast. Do not carry it over to the sink to soak in a pool of soapy water. Cold iron sets food remnants like dried mortar between bricks. We clean the pan while the metal is still thoroughly warm to the touch. For a pan where the egg slid clean, you may only need to take a dry cloth or a bit of paper and wipe the surface out until it is clean. But let us say a bit of the white caught near the top rim where the butter didn't reach. Do not reach for liquid dish soap and never use a green synthetic scouring pad from the store. Those modern pads act like sandpaper. They will scratch away the micro-layers of baked-in seasoning that you have spent months building up. Instead, reach into your cupboard and take a small handful of coarse salt, the heavy, rough kosher grains. Throw that dry salt right into the warm pan. Take a clean, dry rag or a wad of coarse cloth and press the salt against the iron, rubbing it around the bottom and sides in steady, circular motions. Listen to that sound. A deep, rhythmic crunching. The salt acts as a natural, gentle abrasive. It is hard enough to scrape away the fried-on bits of egg, but it is soft enough that it will never scratch the tough, seasoned iron underneath. As you rub, you will see the white salt turn gray and brown, absorbing the excess grease and lifting every stubborn particle from the metal. Once the surface feels perfectly smooth under your cloth, tip the dirty salt into the scrap bin. Now, take the pan to the tap. Run the water until it is hot. Never put cold water into a hot cast iron pan, or the sudden violent shock of temperature will crack the heavy metal right in two. Give the skillet a swift 5-second rinse under the streaming hot water to clear away the last traces of salt. No soap is needed. The heat and the salt have done the cleaning for you. The moment the water hits the pan, the clock is ticking. Remember the old rule. Bare iron and standing water create rust, and rust is the one thing that will truly wreck a good skillet. Do not set it in a plastic rack to air dry. Take a dry towel and wipe out every drop of moisture you can see. But your eyes can deceive you. Water hides deep inside those microscopic pores we talked about, down where a towel cannot reach. Bring the pan straight back to the stove. Light a low flame and set the dry skillet over it for just 2 minutes. Watch the dark surface. Within a minute, you will see a faint, ghostly vapor rise off the black metal and disappear into the kitchen air. That is the heat driving the final hidden moisture out of the very grain of the iron. While the pan is still warm from that flame, we seal it. Dip a clean rag into your oil. I use a simple plain vegetable oil or a bit of melted lard, nothing fancy or scented. Put just 3 or 4 drops into the bottom of the pan. Do not pour a whole spoonful in. If you leave too much oil on the metal, it will bake down sticky, gummy, and spotty, and it will turn rancid before your next meal. Take your rag and spread those few drops evenly over the entire inside of the skillet, bringing it up the walls and over the rim until every inch is covered. Then, and this is the step most folks forget, take a completely dry, clean corner of your cloth and wipe it all back off. Wipe it until the pan looks almost dry again, leaving nothing behind but a soft, dull sheen. You are not building a thick layer of liquid oil. You are leaving a microscopic whisper of fat to seal the raw iron against the dampness of the night air. Let the skillet cool completely right there on the stove. When it is cold, hang it back on its nail or leave it sitting ready for the morning. You have spent less than 2 minutes caring for the metal. But you have ensured that when you crack your egg into it tomorrow, the iron will remember your patience, and it will let go. Now that you have seen the method with your own eyes, I want you to step back with me for a moment. Stop and think about why this old way works. My grandfather never went to a university, and he didn't have fancy letters after his name, but he understood the nature of materials because he spent his whole life working alongside them. Today, we have words from the laboratory for these things, but the truth remains exactly what it was 100 years ago. When you understand the actual science of what is happening inside that dark metal, you stop guessing at the stove, and you start cooking with absolute certainty. Let us look first at that dark, slick surface we call seasoning. Most folks think it is just a layer of grease left behind from yesterday's bacon. But that is a mistake. Grease is soft, it smells rancid after a few days, and it washes away with a little warm water. True seasoning is something entirely different. When you apply a thin whisper of oil to a warm pan and expose it to steady heat, the oil undergoes a chemical change called polymerization. Think of it like this. Liquid oil is made of tiny, independent molecules floating around like loose grains of sand. But when those molecules are heated to a specific point in the presence of iron and oxygen, they begin to change. They reach out and lock hands with one another, forming long, unbroken chains. They transform from a loose liquid into a tough, solid sheet that behaves more like a natural plastic than a fat. It sinks deep into those microscopic valleys we talked about, filling them completely and baking hard right into the grain of the iron. It is the exact same process that happens when a woodworker puts liquid linseed oil on a piece of raw oak. The oil dries and cures into a hard protective varnish that you cannot simply scrape off. When you look at a beautiful pitch-black skillet, you are not looking at dirty iron. You are looking at a masterfully cured shield of plant or animal fat that has become one single body with the metal beneath it. The second piece of the puzzle is the heat itself, and what scientists call thermal mass. Aluminum is a lightweight metal. It takes heat quickly and throws it away just as fast. If you drop a cold egg into a thin aluminum pan, the coldness of the egg instantly drops the temperature of the pan itself, causing the metal to flinch. Cast iron is heavy, dense, and thick. It acts like a massive stone dam, holding back a great river of heat. When you let it preheat thoroughly over that low flame, you are filling that stone reservoir to the very top. When the cold egg hits the hot iron, the pan does not cool down. It has so much stored energy in its bones that it simply drives that heat straight up into the food without losing its own temperature. This creates what we saw earlier, that instant pocket of steam. The bottom of the egg white contains a high amount of water. When it hits that massive store of heat, that water instantly turns into a gas, creating thousands of tiny, invisible pillows of steam underneath the egg. The egg is quite literally floating on a cushion of its own vapor for those first crucial 30 seconds. If the pan had been cold, there would be no instant steam, no cushion, and the liquid protein would have simply glued itself into the iron. But let us be completely honest here. I am not here to tell you that cast iron is a magical cure-all for every task in the kitchen. Every tool has its purpose, and a man who uses an axe to drive a screw is going to end up frustrated. Cast iron has very real, unyielding boundaries of applicability, and if you try to force it to do things it wasn't meant to do, you will end up with ruined food and a stripped pan. First, understand this. Cast iron hates prolonged exposure to acids. If you want to make a quick skillet supper with a squeeze of lemon juice or a splash of white wine at the end, a well-seasoned pan will handle it just fine. But if your goal is to simmer a thick, rich tomato sauce or a vinegar-heavy barbecue sauce for 3 or 4 hours, do not reach for your iron skillet. Tomatoes and vinegar are highly acidic. That acid will slowly dissolve the hard polymer shield you worked so hard to build, eating right through it until it reaches the raw iron underneath. Not only will it strip your pan back to a dull gray, but the acid will also pull iron molecules directly into your food. Your beautiful red sauce will turn a strange, dark metallic color, and it will taste exactly like you dropped a handful of rusty nails into the pot. For long, wet, acidic braises, leave the bare iron on the hook and use an enameled iron pot or a good stainless steel pan instead. Second, iron is a poor tool for delicate, flaky white fish like cod, haddock, or flounder. These fish have very little natural fat binding their muscle fibers together, and they carry a massive amount of delicate water. Unlike an egg, which holds its structure together as it sets, the flesh of a white fish tends to release its moisture too slowly and unevenly. It can easily overwhelm that steam cushion, sinking down into the metal and breaking apart into 100 fragmented pieces when you try to lift it. If you want to sear a thick, sturdy steak of salmon or a solid piece of tuna, the iron will do it beautifully, but keep the delicate river fish in a different pan. Third, look at your stovetop before you invest in old iron. If you cook on a traditional gas range with an open flame or an old-style electric coil stove, cast iron is perfectly at home. But if you have one of those modern flat glass-top induction stoves, you must proceed with extreme caution. Induction stoves heat the metal through magnetic currents, and they can change temperature with terrifying speed. If you place a vintage, thin-walled cast iron skillet from the 1920s onto an induction burner and turn the power up to high instantly, the center of the pan will heat and expand before the outer rim even realizes the stove is turned on. Because iron is a brittle metal that does not stretch, that sudden violent tension will cause the center of the pan to bow downward or upward. You will warp a perfectly flat 100-year-old family heirloom into a spinner that wobbles uselessly on your flat stove forever, or worse. You will hear a sharp sound like a pistol shot as the iron cracks completely in two. Iron is a partner that demands you understand its nature. It will give you a lifetime of faithful service, more honest and durable than any factory-coded shortcut, but only if you respect its limits. It wants a gentle, even heat, a little good fat, and a complete absence of harsh acids and standing water. It asks you to slow your pace down to match its own heavy rhythm. If you can do that, you will possess a tool that never wears out, never breaks a promise, and only grows better with the passing of the years. When you look down into the deep, dark circle of a well-seasoned iron skillet, you are looking at something far greater than a simple tool for frying eggs. You are looking at an unbroken thread of human survival that stretches back through the centuries. This pan does not belong to our modern, disposable way of living. It belongs to an older, more settled wisdom that understood how to cooperate with the earth rather than try to conquer it. If you look back into the old estate ledgers and household wills from the 18th and early 19th centuries, long before my people ever boarded the ships from the Palatinate, you will find something that surprises most folks today. In those days, a heavy iron cooking pot, or a long-handled skillet, was not considered a trivial kitchen utensil to be used and thrown aside. It was frequently listed by name among a family's most valuable worldly possessions, right alongside the family Bible, the milk cow, and the land itself. It was explicitly handed down from mother to eldest daughter, generation after generation. Why? Because in those times, producing high-quality, workable iron required immense, back-breaking human labor. A community's very survival depended on the ironmaster and the blacksmith. To own a piece of iron that was cast true and flat was to own security. It was a guarantee that no matter how hard the winter became, you had the means to heat your food and sustain your children. Stop and think about how those early households actually cooked. They did not have smooth, white countertops or buttons that instantly summoned a clean gas flame. They cooked over the open hearth of a stone fireplace, utilizing the raw heat of burning hardwood logs. In that environment, managing your heat was not a matter of turning a dial. It was a matter of instinct, observation, and touch. If a woman placed her iron skillet directly into the roaring center of a fresh wood fire, the fierce, localized heat would instantly scorch her lard and cause her cornmeal or meat to stick and burn to a cinder. Through daily repetition across hundreds of years, our ancestors learned to read the fire. They would rake a neat bed of glowing, gray-ashed embers out onto the stone hearth, away from the main blaze. They would set the empty iron pan upon a three-legged trivet above those quiet coals and leave it be for 10 or 15 minutes, allowing the heavy metal to slowly draw the deep warmth into its thick bottom. They knew, without needing a textbook to explain it, that the iron had to be thoroughly warm through its entire body before it ever received the food. They discovered that when the iron was patient, the food was cooperative. Now you might think this is all just sentimentality, the nostalgic memories of an old man living in Lancaster County. But understand this: the old ways do not survive merely because they are old. They survive because they are true. If you look into the historical archives of our university extension offices and government agricultural reports from a century ago, you will find that science confirms exactly what our grandmothers practiced by intuition. In the early decades of the 20th century, the United States Department of Agriculture began publishing its famous Farmers' Bulletins, designed to bring practical, verified domestic science to rural homemakers across the country. If you open Farmers' Bulletin number 1180, printed in the 1920s, or look at the domestic economy circulars issued by the Penn State Agricultural Extension from that same era, you will see pages dedicated entirely to the traditional maintenance of cast iron. Those early home economists, working in clean, precise university laboratories, tested the old methods against modern scientific standards. Their bulletins gave the exact same instructions that Esther follows in our kitchen today. They wrote in plain, authoritative ink that a homemaker must never use harsh chemical lye soaps on her seasoned iron, that she must always scrub the vessel with dry, coarse salt to preserve its surface, and that she must invariably place the wet pan back over a low stove flame to drive out the invisible moisture before sealing it with a drop of clean oil, even today. Modern metallurgical journals that study the wear and friction of materials have shown that a properly built layer of polymerized organic fat on a cast iron surface has a lower coefficient of friction than many synthetic coatings. After a few months of daily kitchen use, the old people didn't need a microscope to tell them that. They looked at the way the morning egg slid out of the pan and onto the plate, and that was proof enough. So, look at your own kitchen today. Why do you continue to pay $30, $40, or $50 every few years for a modern pan that is built with a calculated expiration date? Why do you choose to depend on a factory system that profits from your cookware failing you? The solution to your morning frustration does not require you to open your wallet or search through a catalog for a new shortcut. It is already sitting right there in your cupboard, or waiting for you on the bottom shelf of a local thrift shop for a few dollars. It is a simple piece of black iron, heavy and honest. It asks for nothing from you but a 5-minute slowing down of your morning routine, a little kitchen nerve, and a small handful of coarse salt from your pantry. It is an entirely accessible craft, one that anyone with a stove and a flame can master in a single weekend. Tomorrow morning, when you step into your kitchen to prepare your breakfast, I want you to change your rhythm. Do not rush the stove. Take your heavy iron skillet, place it over a low, gentle flame, and walk away from it for a few minutes while you grind your coffee or look out the window at the morning light. Let the iron take its time. Wait until you can feel that deep, steady stone heat radiating against the palm of your hand. Drop in your butter, watch it run thin and bright across the black surface, and then let your egg fall in softly. And remember the second secret. Put your turner down and have faith in the metal. Let the iron do its work, give the handle a gentle shake, and watch that egg glide free. When you master that simple interaction with the heat and the metal, you are doing more than just cooking a clean breakfast. You are reclaiming a piece of self-sufficiency that our world has spent the last 50 years trying to make you forget. You are stepping out of the cycle of buying and discarding, and you are stepping into a tradition of keeping. The kitchen that feeds a family for generations is the kitchen that remembers how to care for its iron. It is a quiet, simple victory, but it is a real one. Try it for yourself tomorrow morning. Listen to what the pan is telling you. Trust the old knowledge and keep your iron true.